afternoon, all. Thank you so much for tuning in to Chronically PWS. Again, my name is Jared Payne, and I am a 45-year-old adult with prader-willi syndrome. And I wanted to talk to you about the final day of the conference, the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research, and specifically regarding the behavioral health panel that I attended that was broken up into different age groups. Of course, I attended the 10 years and older group, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the panelists and maybe share a little bit of the wisdom that I gleaned from what they had discussed with our group, and just overall about the behavioral health aspects of the conference. And I want to go through and just talk to you a little bit about each of these professionals and just their history and what they're doing. Starting with Elizabeth Ruth, who is the Research Senior Specialist and Research Lab Director. Elizabeth Ruth has worked with children and teens with Prader-Willi syndrome for almost 30 years at Vanderbilt University. And if you'd like more information about her specifically, I did include her email link below. Wanted to go over what she had basically discussed with us, a little bit about the behavioral differences that she sees with the different subtypes of Prader-Willi syndrome, a little bit about how to address family dynamics, and I think it was just something that she wanted to point out. Only got to speak to her for just a little bit at our group, but she had spoken specifically about how if you have multiple children in the household, that your Prader-Willi child is not an only child, that you have to make sure, because of the time and attention that it takes to raise that Prader-Willi child and their medical needs, that you address the other children in the home, and that you portion out time to spend with each of the other children, because what she has seen historically, anecdotally, within families is that the other kids seem to go by the wayside and don't feel as involved in lives in the family unit as a whole. So you definitely need to make time to appropriate healthy ways for the other children in the household to get involved in the medical concerns of their medically needy sibling. And there were some examples of that. We'd definitely met parents come with their older adult children and or just older children that weren't affected by Prader-Willi syndrome, where these children in the home had decided to make it part of their educational goals or life goals or their vocation in some way, shape, or form is being involved in Prader-Willi syndrome. I thought that was a really helpful, positive, healthy way to look at Prader-Willi syndrome and the dynamics of the family. And I think Elizabeth had pointed out that you definitely want to keep the other children, the attention going to them, and try to pull away, and even if you're just appointing a time to give specifically to that child, that they're validated, they're heard, and they get what they need within the family dynamic. Next individual is Patrice Carroll, and she's the Director of Prader-Willi Services for Children and Adults at Latham Center in Massachusetts. And again, the big thing with her and what she wanted to make sure, if you're looking at your loved one, at the individual with Prader-Willi syndrome in your home, and you're thinking that at some point they need their independence, for that individual, the independence might mean that in a codependent situation of a group home, and that we needed to change the narrative around that. I tend to agree, and I think, at least with Latham Center's approach to the group home experience for individuals with Prader-Willi syndrome, it's a different paradigm. It's not what you would historically assume and may have experienced a group home to be, that these kids have a good degree of autonomy, they have a good degree of privilege. It's a different experience for them, and it's somewhere that they want to be. I really do feel that. I've befriended quite a few folks online that may come from Latham and from other group homes, and it seems to be that they're well adjusted to those environments, and that it's working for them, working in supported employment and doing a little bit of residential work, working within group homes myself, as I did growing up. I experienced good and bad scenarios for individuals, a lot more good than bad, but there were a few scenarios for different companies that I worked for at the time that I wish could have done better for those individuals. And again, that's my perception. That can be counter to reality for those individuals. But I will tell you this, from what I've experienced with Latham Centers and what I've experienced from people talking about living at Latham Centers and parents' involvement with their kids at Latham Centers, I've heard nothing but positive reflection on them, which goes a long way. And I think that the way that they are funded and the way that they've pointed these residential settings for these kids. For one example, one home that I had heard about, and I'm sure a lot of them are like this, each individual that lives in that home actually has 2 rooms. One is their personal room, and the other is their guest room. And that means that if everyone in that home had a guest, they could all stay there in that home as a guest, that each individual can have a guest at a time. And I thought to myself, that is completely foreign to anything that I've ever known in terms of the appointments of a group home, and just an amazing experience. And I think they're really encouraging. It's really encouraging to hear things like this. In a way that the group homes, think of it this way too. It's giving them a home, that it's giving an environment, if your child were to need it, that they may be able to realize their best self. It can be a gift to them to help them realize their best self. And a lot, beyond just being involved in the group home, they can seek vocation. They get supported employment services outside for that vocation, and some even open businesses and things like that. So again, beyond what you would assume or maybe historically had experienced group homes to be, you're not putting them in a situation where they feel safe, they feel listened to, they feel addressed. And I think that is just so wonderful and important. And again, it really just changed my whole schema of what a group home scenario could be. And I really think in regards to Latham Centers and what they're doing for prader-willi syndrome kids is just wonderful. So a little bit about Patrice Carroll and Latham Centers. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about Dr. Deepan Singh. Dr. Singh is the Vice Chair of Ambulatory Psychiatry Services at Miamonides Medical Center in Brooklyn, New York. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't think I am, but he has a book, and I've included his website in the description of this video, NEUROBEHAVIORAL Manifestations of Prader-Willi Syndrome. And it's a really helpful, practical book. I'm certain I'm gonna have to pick it up and read it myself. But and he talks about the child's psychology through their ages and how or through their lifespan, and how that can how that changes over time. Adult and senior Prader-Willi research, and my age group specifically, is something that's relatively new in terms of research and social aspects. But again, it's something that he did discuss with us briefly, us being in the 10 and up group. Interesting things that he kind of brought to my attention is that the therapeutic dosages for Prader-Willi syndrome, for SSRIs, for sedation, for a lot of medications, psychoactive medications, the therapeutic doses can be a lot lower, a lot smaller than what you were traditionally, than a normal dose. So whenever you approach these medications, it's always good to do it in a very conservative way in terms of what you're assuming a therapeutic dose is going to be. How you as a caregiver, I think was the first thing he had approached, how you as a caregiver want to approach, your care, your self-care, because you have to worry about yourself in order to be able to take care of your loved one, is don't subjectify your loved one to what you've seen in any other individual, because each person with Prader-Willi is different. We're all going to express the syndrome differently. Really, it can be unhealthy to so-and-so's doing better than this person this way, because we're all going to manifest it differently. I don't have scoliosis myself, but I know that there are a lot of individuals with scoliosis and Prader-Willi. I don't put myself up to that to say that I'm any different, or it's just how the syndrome's been expressed in that individual, that it wasn't expressed in me. Also, I have a lot of reproductive issues. Obviously, I have some, and other individuals don't. But I don't want to put myself up to that, because, again, the syndrome expresses itself differently in every individual that's affected. As a caregiver, you have to really appoint yourself time to take care of yourself. And again, in a therapeutic approach, it's something you're going to hear of constantly. You need to find a way to find your center, get back to you a little bit, to do things that you need to do for yourself, to re-energize yourself, and to rest yourself so that you have that energy to devote. Don't treat the act of caregiving as an individual concerted sport. Don't put yourself into it thinking, well, if we can just do this, we can do this. If we can just do this, we can do this. If you're pushing and pushing and pushing, sometimes it can lead to an unhealthy cycle for both you and your child. Concerning psychiatric medicines and how important they can be, there's a pervasive stigma about psychiatric medicines that people really, it's difficult for people to overcome. That pervasive stigma about, or this person needs this medicine, it must be bad, or they must have, that must mean something negative, or must mean that they're weak, or whatever painting of that stigma that you have. But again, you're treating a condition. You wouldn't tell someone with diabetes that they're weak, or they're different, or they're less than because they have to take insulin or take metformin or some other diabetic medication. Same thing, you don't want to treat someone who's got a condition that may manifest behaviorally as being less than, or think that you're giving up in some way. Address that condition with medications. But it is something very big. Another thing to look out for, or that you may want to do developmentally, if you haven't by the age of 10, I assume here in the way that we were discussing it, was ABA therapy, autism evaluation. Autism being another symptom of the syndrome, something that your child may face. Chances are that behaviorally there's going to be some crossover. The application of ABA is going to be helped in some way or another in dealing with, if anything, what seems to be heralded in anxiousness. And that comes across as communication concerns with the individuals that have Prader-Willi syndrome. And I know I had this myself, that I have to basically coach myself to communicate about things. So there may be, even though your child may not fully have that stigma or that paradigm of what autism is, the behaviors that may manifest within Prader-Willi syndrome may be addressable by ABA therapy, and there could be some really good practical approaches that ABA therapy will teach both your child and yourself to deal with. And again, talking about that anxiety and that miscommunication and that communicative difficulty, a lot of it comes down to not feeling heard, and not feeling heard meaning that it's either that you didn't really pay attention, or I wasn't able to communicate it externally. I may have thought it, and I thought it was really funny because a lot of the parents were saying, I've known my kids for so long, I can tell what they're thinking just by the way they're reacting to things, and which is true. A lot of that anxiety stems from that lack of communication. Again, as I said for myself, as was pointed out by other parents, that can definitely be a concern, and what can really affect those behaviors and catalyze those behaviors. Because of that anxiety, they may be showing things of trends of task avoidance. They may become aggressive, or they may just simply shut down based upon that anxiety. There's many ways that they can respond to that. Just as you hear with autism, classically, Prader-Willi syndrome patients, kids, adults, myself, we love schedules. And it really gives us a sense of security, and it helps us set our expectations. Think about it this way: the first schedule that we're setting, if we're hyperphagic, is when food's going to be around. So we're always looking towards snack time, towards meal time, towards dinner time. So our brains are already somewhat wired in that way to have routine or expectation around food, and we tend to try to organize as a coping mechanism for the amount of anxiety we're going through. We tend to organize things in that fashion. Important there that you set those expectations and you communicate schedules, and you get into patterns with your loved one. Going back to medications, and I want to speak of my guys, my girls, my fellow Prader-Willi syndrome patients and caregivers regarding UPD and psychotic incidences, and the experience that Dr. Singh had shared with us, and the experience that we got at the table, because a lot of the individuals, several of the individuals at the table had experienced a psychosis or psychotic episode with their loved one. What catalyzed that? And I thought that this was really illuminating. Actually goes back to medication. As important as it is to be on medication for behaviors and how that can help them and give them the tools and help treat the brain, going back to the fact that therapeutic doses are much lower than normal, and that therapeutic doses, being effective at lower rates. Titration and changing of medications. A lot of these psychosis or psychotic episodes that occurred around the changing of medications, meaning the person was adjusted to their medication, and they may have been showing a new behavior that wasn't being addressed a talk therapy way, that it had been discussed, and the psychiatrist had said, okay, let's try a new medication. Let's see if this will work. So they took the individual off the medication, and then they put them on a new medication, and they followed the typical titration of one medication to another. Therapeutic doses being lower to be effective, and also titration needs to be expanded out into a broader time frame. You don't want to take your child from this medication to this medication at a lower dose and then expect that that's going to have the effect as it would on a person with different physiology, standard physiology. So these UPD, these occurrences seem to be kind of around those changes of medication, which I think is really, if we can get a good standard of treatment for how we're going to do these reactive medications for individuals, then you could see a decrease in the incidence of psychosis. A lot of those individuals face those psychotic break situations at around the mid-20s, early 30s is when they would start or could occur. And I'm not saying that the medication changes is going to be something that start all of these individuals with a psychotic break, but it seems like that it's one of the big triggers for those breaks is changing in medication. And I think that could even probably be true with other medications, not just psychoreactive medications too. Also, Dr. Singh had brought up that these individuals don't present classically as having psychosis, that the symptoms and the reactions can be misread easily in a clinical setting. individuals can be addressed more of having kind of seizures versus psychosis, meaning they'll become rigid and they'll stare and they'll become kind of a locked in. They might come locked in for a little bit. That has a tendency to be misread as a seizure or some kind of other neurological thing. It is neurological. It actually is more psychosis than it is what may be being read in a clinical setting. So be aware of that, and you're going to know with your child, based upon what Dr. Singh had mentioned, when these things occur, because it's going to be a 90-degree turn in behavior. It's going to be something completely unexpected. One individual, one family had stated in the roundtable that out of the 3 people that had shared with us that their loved one had psychotic break or psychosis, the individual had shared that their psychosis for their loved one occurred around some life changes that were sudden. That there was a traumatic event that occurred, and then there was a change in this, and that the person wasn't able to, have input or time for that change, and it had caused that psychosis episode. So we think about kind of these neural pathways, and this, you think of homeostasis as being, getting all your electrolytes in order and your respirations in order. Well, you have kind of a neurological homeostasis as well. And those neural pathways kind of get run in a little bit. They get kind of fixed and a little bit more rigid. You as an adult know this, that you have your ways, you have your tendencies. And for prader-willi syndrome, I think it's even more so that we kind of get adjusted into our ways. And when you have things that kind of upset the apple cart, so to speak, then that can be really devastating for those individuals. And getting these psychiatric evaluations, getting this help, can definitely be a challenge. It's something you want to address with your primary care physician. Obviously, you want to reach out to psychiatry, behavioral therapists, school psychiatrists, and really, if you feel like those individuals aren't providing enough care for your child, it could be a time that you need to kind of have them consult with an expert. The more that we're connected in this world, and the more technology has grown, the more interconnected our healthcare has become. Within my lifetime, I've seen that doctors love to consult with other doctors. They love to share experiences. They love to get more knowledge about the things that they're facing. So I would not really have any trepidation if you're seeing a doctor or a specialist or a therapist to say, hey, can you reach out to Dr. Singh? Can you check this book out that he wrote regarding Prader-Willi syndrome? Can you look at these things? Can you really maybe get some of this information? I think it may be helpful in how you treat. Again, a lot of really mind-opening things about behavioral health with Prader-Willi syndrome. A lot of things helped me. Again, I brought up the fact that I thought, early on in my adulthood, in my in my growth, right after I experienced all the global developmental delays until age 12, some of those ABA tactics may have really helped me communicatively, and just life, having some of those approaches. ABA is something good to engage, even though you may not see your child as someone who's on the autism spectrum. There's some crossover behaviors and tendencies with Prader-Willi syndrome behaviorally that would definitely benefit from ABA therapy. And autism spectrum, it's a very broad and big spectrum. There's no classical manifestation of autism that's easily identifiable anymore. There's just so many so many individuals out there that are affected by autism. As you can hear from me, I thought it was a very productive, interesting talk about behavioral health. I do apologize that I didn't get this video out sooner. I'm recording this from home. I needed to gather my thoughts, and I just wanted to make a good video here discussing these things. Again, these will be linked within the bottom of the video, a link to Elizabeth Ruth, to Patrice Carroll. I'll have a little bit of information for her as well, and definitely Dr. Deepan Singh. It was just overall a really great talk, and I thank you for listening to me go through here my experience, and I hope you're having a great week. And again, thanks for watching Chronically PWS.